"Don't take that medicine, ma'am." She said it almost without moving her lips, in that tone you use to warn about something that shouldn't be heard out loud. And it was in that second, with my heart beating like an old alarm and the smell of alcohol in the air, that I understood someone wanted to send me early to the wake. My own. I am not a woman who's easily impressed. At 69, I've buried a husband, raised a son who lives thousands of kilometers away, and survived 3 renovations, 2 moves, and a heart attack. But when that nurse, Lucy, whispered that in my ear, I felt a strange clarity, as if all the pieces fit together in a puzzle I didn't know I was assembling. I saw her so serene, with her gloves on and the tray barely trembling between her hands, that I didn't know whether to thank her or start praying. The hospital smelled of bleach and reheated coffee. The heart monitor let out a stubborn beep, every so often faster, as if it were nervous too. Outside, the hallway had that silence that isn't silence, but held breaths, nurses' footsteps, and murmurs from people who've already lost count of the nights. I was in bed 203, in a ridiculous gown that opened in the back and with my ego more bruised than my heart. Lucy leaned over me and, without looking straight at me, slid the orange-colored pill into her pocket. "That's not your dose, Maria," she whispered. "Someone switched it in pharmacy." And she left, just like that, as if she hadn't dropped a bomb. I stared at the ceiling, the cold lights, the tubes, the metal hooks. At that hour, you feel more like furniture than a person. But the phrase was still there, floating over me, heavy as a slab. Someone switched it. Who? Why? In hospitals, people die every day, sometimes from illness, sometimes from error. But what I felt that dawn wasn't medical fear. It was human fear. Of the other. The one who smiles and fluffs your pillow while moving you out of the way. At dawn, the doctor came in with her unsweetened coffee face. "You look well, Mrs. Salas. If everything keeps going like this, we'll discharge you tomorrow." "Perfect," I answered, though I'd prefer to leave alive, if it's not too much trouble. She looked at me strangely, as if sarcasm were a symptom of dementia. No one believed me when I told them what the nurse had said, neither the supervisor nor the attending physician. "You must have misheard, ma'am. The pills all look the same," he said, with that condescending patience men use when they think you're exaggerating. But I don't mishear. I'm one of those women who remember the sound of a lie the way they remember a melody. Lucy didn't come back that day. Another girl tended to me, in a hurry, with dark circles down to her neck. She gave me the correct pill, or so I assumed. At night, when they turned out the lights, I swore that if I got out of there alive, I would check every bottle, every paper, every signature. Because something smelled wrong, not like hospital, like betrayal. And right here, before I continue with my story, I'm very curious to know from where in the world and at what time you're joining me today. I'd love to read you in the comments. Sometimes I think the stories that hurt the most are the ones that bind us without touching, only with words. Back to that dawn. I didn't sleep again. Every shadow on the ceiling was a suspicion. Every step in the hallway, a possibility. I tried to remember who had access to my medicines, the nurse, the doctor, the pharmacist, or maybe someone from outside. Veronica, my stepdaughter, had been there that afternoon. She'd brought flowers, the kind that smell too much, as if to cover something up. She kissed my forehead and said, "Rest, Mary Ellen. Don't worry about anything." And I thought, when someone tells you, don't worry about anything, worry about everything. The monitor kept marking its rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. As if each beep repeated in code. Don't take that medicine. The body has memory, but the mind has instinct. And mine told me the worst hadn't even started. I didn't know then that that night I had heard my sentence, and also the first clue to my salvation. The next morning they discharged me. They put in my hands a folder with reports, prescriptions, and a prefabricated smile, the kind that never reached the eyes. Lucy wasn't there, but on the treatment sheet her handwriting was firm, slanted, recognizable. Next to a dosage, there was a tiny ballpoint dot, almost invisible, as if she wanted to leave me a sign. I put it in my bag with the feeling that that mark was more important than the entire diagnosis. Veronica arrived on time, with expensive perfume and the face of a model daughter. She brought a huge bag, wet wipes, an unopened bottle of water, and the patience of someone earning the lead role at another's funeral. While helping me into the car, she laughed with the driver, and I thought there's no sound more false than the laugh that hides calculation. On the way, she talked non-stop about traffic, prices, her job, how exhausting it was to handle everything. She didn't look at me once. I let her talk. I learned long ago that silence is the best mirror for hypocrites. When we got home, the air smelled like stale dust, blinds half drawn, the clock stopped, dried flowers in the vase. It was as if the house had gotten sick with me. Veronica opened the windows and started moving around with ease, as if she were the owner. Changed the sheets, checked the medicine cabinet, filed the bills. At one point, with a voice sweeter than anesthesia, she said, "Look, Mary Ellen, I've been thinking. This house is too big for you alone. You could sell it, move to something smaller, and we'll help you with the admin. What do you think?" "Of course, dear. Sounds perfect," I answered, with a smile that could have frozen a volcano. "But first let me enjoy my walls a little. I haven't said goodbye to them yet." She nodded, feigning tenderness, and carried on as if she were already measuring the square meters of her future. The afternoon was long, the kind where the sun drags itself over the tiles like a tired cat. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one that holds the shape of my back, and went over everything that had happened. Lucy's voice came back like an echo. "Don't take that medicine." Sometimes I thought I heard it in the hum of the fan, in the clinking of spoons. It wasn't paranoia, it was intuition. At this age, you already tell the difference. That night, the bedroom door opened without a sound. Lucy appeared in her white uniform, eyes on alert. "I came to drop off the bandages, Mary." "Don't worry, I'm off shift." I thanked her. She looked at me for a moment, hesitating, and finally spoke. "You should check who's handling your prescriptions." "Who? Veronica?" I asked, feigning surprise. Lucy didn't answer. She pulled a box from her pocket and set it on the table. "This is what you should have been given. Compare the names." The bottle I had said something else. One extra letter, a different dose. "What happens if I take this one?" I asked. "Depends. If you want to sleep, a lot. Maybe forever." My hand didn't shake, but I felt a cold current crawl up my back. Lucy said goodbye discreetly, leaving me as she found me, between disbelief and rage. As soon as she left, I opened my nightstand drawer and checked my papers. The blue folder, the usual one, was gone. I searched behind the albums, under receipts, at the back of the closet. Nothing. In its place, I found a new folder, beige, with my name written in handwriting too tidy to be mine. Inside, a will dated recently, and my signature clumsily imitated. It said that everything, absolutely everything, would go to Veronica Mitchell in recognition and affection. I sat on the bed, with the document in my hands. My fingers trembled, but not from fear, from fury. It didn't hurt that they wanted my money. It hurt that they thought I wouldn't notice. It hurt the arrogance of assuming age makes you an idiot. It hurt that affection could be measured in deeds. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Daniel, my son, from Canada. His voice came with that faraway echo of someone who lives too far from his guilt. "Mom, Veronica told me you got out of the hospital. So good you're better." "Yes, better for now." "Tell me, did you know anything about a new will?" "What will?" he asked, distracted. "One where I apparently got generous and leave everything to your dear stepsister." "Mom, don't start. I'm sure it's a mistake. You know how you get when you obsess." "Ah, yes. Of course," I cut him off. "Forget it, son. Enjoy your winter. It's not that cold here yet." I hung up slowly. I didn't cry. At this point, you don't cry. You dry up inside. I stayed in silence, staring at the wall, until I heard a noise in the hallway. Soft footsteps, like someone trying not to be noticed. I didn't move. The door was ajar, and a line of light slipped through the crack. I could hear the knob turning slowly, a barely audible creak. Then I understood the pill wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning. Someone wanted to make sure I never woke up again. And I, who have spent my whole life waking at the wrong time, promised myself that this time no one would put me to sleep without permission. I spent the rest of the night awake, the beige folder on my lap and the lamp on like a useless lighthouse. The wall clock read 3:30 when I decided I would no longer be anyone's patient. I stood up carefully, my body still clumsy from the hospital days, and opened the old desk where I keep important papers. Everything was there: policies, deeds, IDs, bank receipts. Everything but the original version of my will. The blue folder had disappeared. There were no traces, not a folded page, not a label out of place, just the perfect planned emptiness of someone who takes their time to erase the tracks. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten, and the air smelled of old damp, of a house breathing on its own. I made coffee, more out of habit than pleasure, and drank it watching the steam rise slowly, as if in that smoke I could read the intentions of the living and the secrets of the dead. On the table was still the medicine bottle Lucy had left. I stared at it for a long time and felt certain that that small box was the loose thread of a much bigger story. I put the bottle in the drawer, under some tablecloths, and sat down to think. I had no proof, but I had memory, and at my age, memory is worth more than any lawyer. Veronica arrived mid-morning, perfumed, impeccable, with a shop window smile. She brought a tray with pastries and orange juice. "I brought you breakfast, Mary Ellen," she said in a nurturing nurse tone. "I don't want you to exert yourself, rest." I watched her as she set the juice on the table, her calculated movements, the way her eyes scanned everything. It wasn't a visit, it was an inspection. "Thank you, dear," I said, "but I don't like juice. I prefer coffee." "Coffee is bad for you," the doctor said, so she replied. "The doctor or you?" I asked without smiling. She froze for a second, then faked a laugh. "Oh, Mary Ellen, always so distrustful." I let it go. No use arguing. I needed to watch her, not scare her. After clearing the tray, she went over to the desk under the excuse of opening the windows. I noticed her eyes stopped for an instant on the drawer where the blue folder used to be. It was just a gesture, a shadow, but enough. I knew she was looking for something she had already taken. When she left, I checked my phone. There were several messages from Daniel, quick phrases full of lukewarm guilt. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm sure it'll all be cleared up. Veronica is only trying to help you. Rest. Don't think weird things." Weird things. How easy it is to call weird what you don't want to see. I didn't reply. I just wrote one line. Lucy was right. Then I turned the phone off and left it face down. The screen reflected the midday light like a tiny mirror, and in it I saw my face, a mix of weariness and stubbornness, the face of someone starting to understand her own story. That afternoon the house filled with sounds. The doorbell, the phone, the neighbor's blender. Everything seemed louder, more insistent, as if the world wanted to distract me. I focused on the sound that wasn't heard, the exact silence of the drawer where my papers were missing. I opened the closets, the trunks, the old dresser. In a compartment at the back, wrapped in a silk scarf, I found something that chilled me. A copy of my husband's death certificate, but with an altered date. The original said 2019. That one, 2020. Just a year, a small digit, but enough to invalidate any document signed afterward. If that version reached the notary, all of mine would go straight to Veronica. They had done it with surgical precision. I sat on the bed, breathing slowly. I remembered the day of the funeral, the smell of wreaths, cold hands giving me automatic condolences, Veronica crying without tears, and me, stunned, signing papers I didn't read. Maybe it started there, or maybe before, when her father still breathed and she already looked at him as if he were a walking inheritance. I thought of Daniel, of his comfortable distance, of how easily love turns into neglect when oceans lie in between. I thought of Lucy, the only one who had spoken to me without feigned compassion. At dusk, the doorbell rang again. It was her, the nurse. She came without a uniform, in civilian clothes, hair down, and a look that mixed urgency and fear. "I can't stay long," she said, stepping in. "But I had to tell you." I offered her a seat, poured coffee. "Talk, Lucy. I was checking at the hospital. Your medication order went out signed by someone with the last name Montiel." My throat went dry. "Veronica? I don't know for sure, but the documents are doctored. I can't report them without proof." "Then let's find it," I told her. Lucy looked at me as if she hadn't expected that answer. "Are you sure, Mary? This could be dangerous." "At this point, dear, dangerous is keeping on trusting." We stayed silent for a few seconds, both understanding we'd just crossed an invisible line. Outside, the wind moved the curtains as if the house were breathing, and for the first time in many days, I felt a spark, a tiny sense of control. Lucy gave me her number on a piece of paper. "Call me if you notice anything odd." "Everything is odd lately," I replied, "but I will." When she left, I turned off the lights and lay down without fully closing my eyes. I heard footsteps in the hallway. The wood creaked with a rhythm I already knew, Veronica's measured heel. She passed by my door and stopped. My breath caught in my chest. I waited. The door didn't open. The sound receded slowly, and only then did I let the air go. I had no doubts. That woman slept peacefully because she believed she'd already won me. She didn't know that I, meanwhile, had just begun to write my revenge. The next morning I woke with a clear head, clearer than in weeks, as if fear had settled overnight and in its place something firmer remained: resolve. I got up slowly, turned on the radio to have any voice sounding, and made coffee. The bubbling of the filter gave me an old, domestic calm, the kind that comes from knowing that, although the world is falling apart, you can still make a good coffee. As I drank, I thought of Lucy and last night's conversation. There was in her a mix of bravery and resignation, as if she'd long been watching good people get crushed by the right last. Names. I decided to call her at noon. If we were going to uncover something, I needed a plan. Past 11, the doorbell rang. It was Veronica, of course, always showing up when I least expected, as if she had a radar for moments she could interrupt. She brought a folder and a catalog smile, that smile that shows teeth but not soul. "I brought some insurance papers, Mom," she said. And that word, Mom, sounded so hollow I almost laughed. "Just signatures, nothing complicated." "Sure, dear, leave them on the table," I answered. "I'll look them over later. It's better if you sign now, so you don't forget." Then I looked at her, straight in the eyes, and for an instant, just one, I saw something I couldn't tell if it was fear or impatience. "I don't forget anything, Veronica." "Not yet." The tension floated like her perfume, sweet and heavy. She said she was in a hurry, that she'd come back later to pick up the papers, and left a trail of anxiety behind. As soon as the door closed, I grabbed the phone and called Lucy. "I need you to come," I said, "but without a uniform. I'll be there in an hour." When she arrived, she had a small backpack and a set expression. She told me she'd talked to a friend, a former colleague who worked in the hospital archives. The friend had confirmed that my medication order had been modified from an account that didn't belong to the medical area but to administration, and the person who authorized it had used an ID number that matched Veronica's. "It's not legal proof," Lucy said, "but it's a lead." I nodded. "Then we'll turn it into proof." That's when I showed her the beige folder and the copy of the death certificate with the altered date. Lucy examined them carefully, running her fingers over the signatures as if she could feel the lie under the ink. "This is serious," she murmured. "If she changed the date, she can take everything." "Not if the forger ends up," confessing, I said. "We planned without big speeches, just looks and short phrases." She suggested using the old phone I had tucked away, one of those devices that seem obsolete but record better than any modern app. We hid it among the sofa cushions. We agreed that Lucy would pretend to be off her post. That way Veronica would feel free to move. "When she comes for the signatures, we'll record," I said. "You'll see she won't resist bragging about her play." Lucy barely smiled. Sometimes ego makes more noise than guilt. We spent the afternoon rehearsing lines, testing the phone angle, checking the mic. I felt like an old actress prepping her final scene, adrenaline rushing through my veins. It had been years since I'd felt so alive. When it got dark, Lucy helped me make dinner and left, promising to return early the next day. I stayed alone, going over the plan's details, the clock ticking like a countdown. Veronica showed up on time, as if someone had tipped her that the show was about to start. She brought the same papers and a new folder. She kissed my forehead, that gesture she loved to use as a shield, and sat across from me. "Did you review the documents, Mom?" "Yes, dear. They're immaculate. Very well done, I'd say." She smiled, flattered without catching the irony. "Then let's sign." She spread the sheets on the table and handed me a pen. "Here, here, and here. Just account adjustments and a power for me to represent you. Of course, dear, you take care of me so much I don't even need to think anymore." She let out a little laugh. "You know I do it for your own good." "Yes," I said slowly. "You always do it for my own good, Veronica. From the beginning, I signed with a steady hand, though inside my heart pounded like a drum. As I signed, I noticed how she watched me, waiting for the stroke to finish, like someone watching a domino piece fall and knock the rest. When I finished, she put the pages away and said she had to go, that she'd be back later with some deeds to review. She hugged me before leaving, and I felt the cold of her skin against mine, the total absence of affection. As soon as the door closed, I turned to the sofa. Lucy came out from the hallway where she'd hidden and gave a thumbs up. "Got it all." "Perfect." We sat to listen to the audio. Her voice sounded clear, firm, pleased with herself. Every word was a rope tied around her neck. That night I didn't sleep out of tiredness, but out of a kind of contained euphoria. It rained outside, the house smelled of damp, and I, for the first time in a long time, was sure the fear had changed sides. As I listened to the water tapping on the panes, I thought of my husband, how he would have hated to see the two of us in that silent war over what he built. But I also knew that if he were alive, he would have told me what he once did when we were young and someone tried to swindle us. Let them get confident, Mary Ellen. Only those who think they're invincible make mistakes. I smiled in the dark, the audio looping in my headphones. Veronica didn't know it, but at that moment she was already signing her own defeat. The next morning the sky dawned a thick gray, the kind of color that makes thoughts heavier. My knees hurt, my back hurt, and yet I felt young, or at least alive. It was a strange sensation. To be afraid and, at the same time, eager to see how far it would all go. I got up early, put the water on, and opened the curtains to let in some light. Outside, the garden looked asleep, wet leaves and grass full of tiny cat prints. I turned on the radio just out of habit, but turned it off right away. I didn't want foreign voices mixing with mine. I needed to think. Lucy arrived on time, hair tied back, and a notes folder. She had listened to the audio several times overnight and came wearing the expression of someone who has made an important decision. "This is no longer just a family trap, Mary," she said as soon as she entered. "If the medication was altered, it's a crime. And if it's a crime, she'll have to confess," I replied. "But we still don't have the missing piece." Lucy looked at me a moment, trying to guess how far I was willing to go. "I have a friend at the clinic where the doctor who signed your papers works," she said. "I can ask her to check the records. If that seal was stolen, we'll know." "Do it," I asked. "But carefully. Veronica suspects nothing yet, and I'd rather she keep believing she's in control." We spent the rest of the morning reviewing the files on the old phone. Every audio, every little fragment, every silence had something. Lucy took notes with a surgeon's patience. At one point she paused, went back a few seconds, and looked at me. "Listen to this," she said, and turned up the volume. It was Veronica's voice, barely a murmur, but you could hear her say, "Gavin already got the copy of the insurance. Once everything's signed, there won't be any problem with the certificate." I froze. "Gavin?" I asked. "Her husband?" "Seems like it," Lucy replied. "He doesn't work, does he? He works at ruining lives. That he does." We saved the audio in a password-protected folder. I didn't know how much a proof like that would be worth in court, but it was worth gold to me. Meanwhile, I needed someone else to help me watch from outside, someone who wouldn't draw attention. Then I thought of Teresa, my neighbor, the one who sees everything from her front window, with her binoculars and her inexhaustible curiosity. I called her that afternoon. "Terre, I need your eyes," I said. "Oh, Mary Ellen, gladly. But let's be clear. If I get into trouble, you pay for my hairdresser." I laughed. It had been days since I laughed like that. I explained what I needed. Note who came in and out of my house. Keep a special eye when I was with Veronica. She got excited, as if I'd given her a role in a soap opera. "Count on me, dear," she said. "I won't miss a move from here." It rained again that night, and while the water beat the glass, I wrote down every detail in a notebook. Dates, names, hours. It was like assembling a puzzle with stained pieces. My head hurt, but the weariness tasted like purpose. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a patient waiting for instructions, but a woman taking back the helm of her life. At midnight I went to bed and slept with the phone under my pillow, as if technology could protect me from dreams. 2 days later, Teresa called, excited. "Mary Ellen, the blonde just left your house," she said, meaning Veronica. She was carrying a big black bag, like the ones used for papers. A knot formed in my stomach. I didn't ask anything else. I hung up and waited. Veronica didn't show up that afternoon, but the next day she did. Her smile was more forced than usual. "I came to see how you're doing, Mom," she said. "You look tired. You should rest more." "You're right, dear. Lately I can't sleep. I wake up at any noise." "I can bring you a mild sedative," she offered. "The doctor says they're safe." "Don't worry. I prefer insomnia to eternal rest." She laughed, uncomfortable, pretending not to catch the irony. When she left, I checked the nightstand and found the medicine bottle open. One capsule was missing. I called Lucy right away. She tried again, I said. Lucy arrived at dusk, examined the bottle, smelled it, turned it in her hand. "This isn't digoxin, Mary. It's a sedative. If you take it with your heart meds, it can be lethal." I figured, we have to do something now. We will, but our way. I asked her to keep that bottle and get another identical one with the right label. I wanted Veronica to think everything was the same. "Next time she comes, I'll pretend I took it." He said. "I want to see her face." 2 days went by without news, until one afternoon, Teresa called, agitated. "Mary Ellen, I think you should see this. I have a photo." The shameless one came out of the notary's, and guess with whom? "Your son-in-law." "Send it to me," I asked. The image was blurry, but enough. Veronica and Gavin walking together, she with a folder in her hand, he looking around. Rage rose like a heat wave. It wasn't just greed, it was a two-handed plan. And I, who had only wanted to survive, began to want justice, the kind of justice not always pronounced in courts but that still leaves a mark. When Lucy came that night, I showed her the photo. "This is enough to make them tremble," I said. She nodded, serious, with a mix of respect and complicity. "What do you plan to do?" "I don't know yet, but I want them to feel watched. I want them to know that I know." I left the living room light on and the window ajar, as if inviting a look. I put the empty bottle on the table, clearly visible. Then I sat with a cup of tea and waited. Veronica didn't show up that night, but the next day Teresa called. "There was a black car parked in front of your house last night. It didn't move for hours." "Leave it," I said. "Let them watch. Maybe they'll start seeing what they never wanted to, that I'm still here, breathing, awake, and more alive than they imagine." That morning, I knew I couldn't stop. It wasn't about money or inheritance, it was dignity. I wouldn't allow my old age to be written by thieves disguised as family. And while I sipped my coffee, I decided the next move would be mine. That night I slept little. Not from fear, but because my head worked like an old engine that won't shut off. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blurry photo of Veronica and Gavin outside the notary. The black bag Teresa saw leaving my house, the altered pills, the porcelain smile with which my stepdaughter called me Mom. Everything. fit like a puzzle assembled behind my back. At dawn, I already knew what to do. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about putting the pieces on the table, forcing them to look at each other and see who blinked first. I called Veronica mid-morning, my voice calm and a perfectly rehearsed tone of weakness. "Dear, I'd like you to come for lunch on Sunday," I said. "I feel lonely, and Daniel wrote he might travel soon. It'd be nice to get together, like a family." There was a brief pause on the other end, the kind of silence that makes noise when someone suspects a trap. "Of course, Mom. What a good idea. Gavin and I will bring something tasty." "Don't bring anything. Just come hungry," I replied, and hung up before she noticed the smile slipping out. Lucy arrived shortly after and I told her the plan. She didn't try to dissuade me. She knew there was no turning back. I asked her to bring her phone, the one with a clearer recorder than mine, and to come that Sunday with any excuse, even just to take my blood pressure. She got it instantly. "I can leave the mic under the tablecloth," she said. "It records 3 hours straight, and no one notices." "Perfect," I answered. "If I can't silence them, at least let it all be recorded." Sunday dawned bright, as if the sky wanted to mock what was about to happen. I made baked rice, the recipe my husband loved, and set the table with the floral cloth I only used on important dates. As I arranged the cutlery, I thought there was something almost comical in all that domestic staging. Me, the supposed frail old woman, preparing a banquet for my own executioners. At 12 sharp, the doorbell rang. Veronica appeared in a beige dress, Gavin behind her, carrying a cream cake that looked heavier than his conscience. "The house looks lovely," she said as she walked in. "Smells delicious." "I'm glad you like it, dear. Everything is just how you like it, clean, tidy, and with open doors." Lucy arrived a little later, feigning coincidence. "Sorry, Mary. I was passing through the neighborhood and thought I'd check how you're doing." "What a coincidence," I said, not hiding the irony. "Stay for lunch. Let's see if I still have a touch in the kitchen." Veronica smiled tensely, but agreed. They sat down, poured wine, and the chatter started with banalities. The weather, the news, supermarket prices. I looked at them, alternating tenderness and contempt. Part of me still couldn't understand how they could talk about such small things while a plan so dirty was under the table. At one point, Veronica took a folder from her bag and set it by the plate. "By the way, Mom, I brought some bank documents. Just tweaks so you don't have to worry about your accounts." Lucy dropped her gaze and pretended to swirl her glass. I leaned forward. "And what do I have to do with that?" "Just sign." "Nothing complicated," she replied with her rehearsed sweetness. "It's so Gavin and I can cover your medical expenses without trouble." "How considerate," I said, looking at the paper. "And what if I don't want to sign?" Her smile froze for just a second. "Well, Mom, in that case, everything gets harder. We'd have to get you to sign anyway, but with a notary's intervention. It'd be a hassle for you." Gavin coughed, uncomfortable. Lucy pretended to check her watch. The tick-tock became unbearable. Then, with a slow movement, I took my pen from my pocket and signed the blank sheet. I did it calmly, savoring the moment. Veronica breathed with relief, thinking the game was hers. "There, dear." "Happy?" "Very," she answered, stowing the paper. "You'll see it was for the best." "I hope so," I said. "Sometimes you sign things that later turn out to be your salvation." The rest of lunch was a pantomime. She talked about projects, trips, Daniel and his life in Canada. I nodded, serving dessert as if everything were the scene of a perfect family. But inside I felt the rope was taut, ready to snap. When they finally left, I leaned back in the chair and breathed deep. Lucy came out of the kitchen with the phone in hand. "It's all there," she said. "From the moment they came in to the moment they left. Good. Let the world hear them lie. It's about time." I didn't want dinner that night. I sat by the window and let the cool air ruffle my hair. In the garden, the lights reflected in puddles from the previous day's rain. I thought of my husband, how he would have laughed at my performance. He always said I had a talent for theater, and in the end he was right. I had just given the best show of my life. As the clock struck midnight, my phone vibrated on the table. A message from Daniel. "Mom, I'll see if I can travel sooner. You left me worried. I smiled. Maybe, for once, the distance was starting to shrink. I turned off the lights and went up to my room. The silence was dense, but not hostile. On the nightstand, the empty bottle I'd left in plain sight was still there, like a trophy. I knew Veronica had seen it, and that, in some way, the idea that I was taking what she gave me put her at ease. The irony was delicious. While she slept thinking she'd won, I had her defeat recorded in high definition. Before sleeping, I wrote a single sentence in my notebook. When the truth arrives, it doesn't shout. It just sits and waits. And that night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. Because fear, at last, had moved house. Monday dawned with that mild air of days when nothing seems to move, as if the world were breathing slowly before a storm. I woke early, with the feeling something was about to happen. My body hurt, but my mind worked with the precision of a Swiss watch. Every memory in its place, every gesture of Veronica's kept as evidence, every word of hers engraved in my head and on Lucy's phone. I got up quietly, made coffee, and as I was pouring it, the doorbell rang. It was the postman, a large envelope with Canadian postmark. I opened it without thinking. Inside, a letter from Daniel. He said he had already bought the ticket, that he'd arrive Thursday, that he needed to clear some things up. And though the tone was cold, between the lines you could feel the tremor of guilt. I stood with the envelope in my hands, savoring that mix of relief and fear you feel when a son finally decides to come back, even if it's to confront you. The phone pulled me from my thoughts. It was Lucy. "Did you sleep well, Mary?" she asked. "Like a vengeful baby," I replied. "Do you have the audio copies?" "Yes, already stored on an external drive." My friend at the hospital confirmed the seal. "It was stolen. We've got everything." "Perfect," I said. "Then when Daniel arrives, we'll show him. I want him to hear with his own ears what his stepsister planned." I spent the rest of the day in small routines, trying to make the house not smell like conspiracy. I swept, watered the plants, lit a lavender candle, and started tidying drawers. It's curious how, when you know something big is coming, you feel the need to clean, to clear the ground, as if the truth needed space to enter. In the afternoon, the phone rang again. Veronica, her syrupy voice. "Mom, I was just calling to see how you felt after Sunday." "Much better, dear," I answered. "I slept so well I think the pills finally kicked in." There was a short silence on the other end. "That's good. I'm glad," she said at last. "Gavin has to travel, but I'll come by tomorrow." "I'll be waiting," I replied. "You can tell me how things are going at the notary's." The disguised question left her mute a few seconds. "What notary?" "Oh, I don't know. I thought I heard you mention one." I must have dreamed it. "You know, Age." "Yes, of course. Age," she repeated, and hung up. I didn't turn any lights on that night. I stayed by the window, with a blanket over my shoulders and Lucy's phone in my hand, listening to the lunch audio again. It was almost an act of pleasure. Hearing her voice so sure, so confident, talking about me as if I were already a closed case. I thought about how much we trust blood, how easy it is to look away when the one who hurts us carries our surname. When the audio ended, the silence felt sweeter than sad. The next day, Lucy came early with a nervous look. "Daniel called me," she said. "He wants to talk to me when he arrives, asked if he can stay at my place the first days." "With you?" "Why?" "He says he doesn't want to sleep here until he knows what's going on. Maybe he's afraid to face you." "I'm not surprised," I replied. "The men in this family always hide behind women." In the afternoon, Veronica appeared with a bottle of wine and a bouquet of yellow flowers. "I brought this, Mom. Gavin had to travel, but I wanted to stop by." "What a detail, dear. Though I can't drink wine. You know, the heart. Well, save it for when you feel better." She sat in front of me, legs crossed, bag on her knees, and started talking trivialities, but I could see the nerves in the way she spun the ring on her finger. "I sense you're uneasy, Veronica. Something wrong?" "No, nothing. Just tired." "From work, or from waiting for me to die?" I asked without raising my voice. The glass in her hand trembled a second, barely a blink. Don't say that, Mom, please. I'm not saying it, I'm thinking it. And when I think it too much, I might start saying it out loud. She stood abruptly, muttered something about an appointment, and left. I watched her from the window and saw how, reaching the car, she brought the phone to her ear. I didn't know whether she called Gavin or the notary, but I knew she was scared, and that, for the first time, gave me a strange peace. 2 days later, Daniel arrived. I waited at the door, my heart pounding, like a drum. When he stepped out of the taxi, I saw the boy he was and the man I never quite learned to raise. He approached with a mix of tenderness and distance, hugged me quickly, almost with guilt. Mom, he said, we have to talk. Of course, come in. Inside, the house smelled of fresh coffee. Lucy had prepared everything, audios ready, folders in order. We sat in the living room and, without preamble, I put the phone in his hand. Listen. For several minutes, there was nothing but Veronica's voice, soft, kind, explaining how she'd sign in my place, how everything would stay in the family. Daniel gripped the phone tightly, jaw tense, eyes unblinking. When the audio ended, he looked up. It can't be, he whispered. It can, and you believed her all this time. I didn't know anything, I swear. Of course you didn't, because you didn't want to. It's easier to think your mother is exaggerating than accept your sister wants her dead. He stood, paced the room, then stopped at the window. I'm going to confront her, he said at last. No, not yet. Why? Because we still don't have her fully cornered. There's one piece missing, and I want to see her fall with no escape. Daniel looked at me, confused, but didn't insist. In his eyes was something I hadn't seen in years: respect. For the first time, he understood his mother wasn't a disoriented old woman, but a wounded woman who knew very well how to defend herself. He stayed at the house that night. We didn't speak much. He just held my hand a while and fell asleep on the sofa. At dawn, as I watched him sleep, I thought of everything we'd lost to half-truths, to trusting those who hide behind a surname. Outside, the sky began to lighten, and in the house's silence you could hear the clock's little click marking 6. I knew that when Veronica discovered Daniel was there, the game would change. But it no longer mattered. Now we were 2 against 1. And the truth, like strong coffee, is always best served freshly made. The next morning, the house filled with a thick silence, the kind that precedes decisions you can't take back. Daniel still slept on the sofa, shoes on, face tense even in dreams. I stood in the doorway a while, recognizing in his expression something I hadn't seen since he was a child, that mix of fear and courage that came when he finally grasped a painful truth. I put the coffee maker on and waited with a feigned calm. When he woke, he ran a hand through his hair and looked at me with red eyes. I couldn't sleep, he said. I kept hearing her voice in my head. You'll get used to it, I replied. That woman talks even in dreams. We have to go to a lawyer, Mom. This is serious. We will, but first we close the trap. It's almost ready. Lucy arrived soon after, punctual as ever, a folder under her arm. She had results from her friend's investigation at the hospital. She spread them on the table. Copies of records, forged medical seals, prescription orders that didn't match my reports. All signed with Dr. Rivers's stamp. This is what we were missing, Lucy said. The doctor has to see this, and when he does, we'll know if he was accomplice or victim. Then let's go, I said, and Daniel nodded without thinking. The 3 of us went to the doctor's office that same afternoon. The building smelled of disinfectant and air conditioning, a scent that always reminded me of the distance between the sick and the healthy. Rivers welcomed us kindly, though I noticed the unease in his eyes when Lucy shut the door and set the folder on his desk. Doctor, I began, I need you to tell me if you recognize these signatures. He took the sheets, studied them for several seconds, and I watched his face fall apart. This can't be, he murmured. This seal is mine, but it disappeared from my office 3 months ago. I didn't authorize any of this. Lucy crossed her arms. Someone used it to doctor prescriptions. Who? He asked. The same person who forged my mother's will, Daniel said, with a hardness that surprised me. My sister. The doctor fell silent, visibly affected. He ran his hands over his face, sighed, and leaned toward us. If this is all true, you must report it. I can state those prescriptions aren't legitimate, and I can review the hospital cameras to see who picked them up. Do it, I replied. It's time someone else saw what I've been seeing. We left with the feeling the ground was shifting under us. In the elevator, Daniel said nothing, but his breathing was ragged. When we got home, Teresa was waiting at the door, flustered, phone in hand. Mary Ellen, I just saw your stepdaughter leaving the notary again, but this time she wasn't alone. The man looked like the same one from the photo, the one with her last time. Gavin, I muttered. Yes, and they looked ticked off. They got in the car and headed downtown. Lucy jotted it down and looked at me with determination. We have to tell someone else, she said. I nodded slowly. I have an idea. I know someone who could help quietly. A retired inspector? Your friend, right? Yes, she answered. Lara, if I explain, he'll know how to handle it. He came that afternoon, a man with a weathered face, calm gaze, and low voice. He listened to everything without interrupting, took mental notes of every detail, and finally said, I can record a confession if you can provoke it. Ideally, get them all together. That's already arranged, I replied. Veronica is coming tomorrow. She said she wants to talk. Lara nodded. Then let me prepare the gear, and you act as usual. When he left, Daniel looked at me worried. Doesn't it scare you this could get out of hand? I lost control the day that woman changed my pills, I said. Now all I have left is dignity. The night was long. I wandered the house aimlessly, touching the furniture as if I needed to anchor myself to the present. In every corner I saw past shadows. The chair where my husband used to read, the framed wedding photo, the letters Daniel once wrote me when he was still afraid to go so far away. I thought about how a whole life can come undone by the ambition of someone who never understood the value of what can't be bought. The next morning everything was set. Lara arrived early with a tiny recorder he hid under a living room ornament. Lucy made coffee and pretended to check my vitals. Daniel, nervous, paced back and forth. And I, seated in my favorite armchair, felt like an actress waiting for her final scene. At 11:30, Veronica showed up. She came alone, with dark glasses and a tired face, but still had that superficial elegance that made her look like she owned everything. Mom, she said sweetly, I came because I want to fix things. Fixing them sounds good, dear. Sit, please. She sat across, crossed her legs, and sought my eyes with a rehearsed smile. I know we've had our differences, but everything I did was for your well-being. I don't want you thinking ill of me. I don't think ill, Veronica, I said calmly. I think exactly what is. What does that mean? It means I already know about the medicines, the will, the notary. Her face tightened, color rising in her cheeks. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do. And the best part is, I don't have to convince you, but the recorder under that ornament, the silence that followed, was absolute. Daniel clenched his fists. Lucy held her breath. Veronica looked around, realizing too late. This is a trap, she said, standing up. No, dear, I answered. A trap is what you did. This is called justice. Lara then stepped out from the hallway with the recorder in hand. I think this will do, he said in a low voice. We have everything recorded. Veronica stared at him, confused, and tried to leave, stumbling into the table. You'll pay for this, she shouted. You don't know who you're messing with. Oh, we do, I replied, with someone who tried to erase her family over a few deeds. She left, slamming the door, the echo ringing through the house. No one spoke for a while. Lara pocketed the recorder and gave me a knowing look. She can't deny it now, he said. In a few days they'll summon her. When they all left, I stayed alone, seated in the armchair, listening to the echo of the slam still vibrating in the air. Outside, a fine, persistent rain had begun, as if washing the air. I served myself a coffee, drank it slowly, and for the first time in a long time felt the house was mine again. Not because the law said so, but because the truth, finally, had returned to its place. The next day dawned with a clear sun coming through the curtains, as if it wanted to erase the night's humidity, but there was no way to erase the weight floating in the house. I slept only a couple of hours and still got up with a sharp mind, a lucidity that hurt. I walked to the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, and as the aroma spread, I thought about how everything had compressed into a week. From a poisoned pill to a recorded confession. From absolute loneliness to a declared war. I felt a strange calm, as if after so much fear I'd gotten used to living inside it. Sometimes the body adapts even to the unbearable. Daniel came down shortly after, disheveled and pale. He didn't say good morning, just asked if there were any news. Lucy arrived minutes later, coat over her arm and phone in hand. She explained Lara had handed the recording to a prosecutor friend, and that any moment Veronica would be called in for a formal statement. I nodded without speaking, because part of me knew that wouldn't stop her, that the kind of person who forges medicines and wills doesn't surrender to a simple legal call. That kind of person only understands the language of control and threat, and they'd already taken too much from me to keep fearing. At noon the doorbell rang, and before I could stand, Daniel went to open. I heard his dry voice and instantly recognized the other one, that mix of expensive perfume and sweet poison that made my skin prickle. Veronica. She came in without asking, with dark glasses and a folder under her arm. She was rattled, makeup smudged, hands trembling. "What did you do, Mom?" she blurted first. I didn't move from the chair. "Nothing that didn't deserve to be done," I answered. "I just returned a bit of light so you can see yourself as you are. Do you know what you've caused?" she shouted. "Do you have any idea what a complaint like that means? Yes, it means someone will finally look at you without your mask. You don't get it. You're ruining your own name. They'll say you're crazy, that this was a hallucination of your old age. They'll say it, sure, but they won't believe it, because there are recordings, papers, witnesses." Daniel stepped in, voice firm but shaky. "Veronica, enough. I listened to everything. I know what you did." She looked at him with a mix of hatred and surprise, as if his betrayal hurt more than mine. "You too? You're going to judge me? After everything I did for this name, you did nothing for anyone," he replied. "You only wanted what wasn't yours." Veronica dropped the folder on the table. Several documents slid out, maybe the same ones she had handled at the notary's. Some had fake seals, others my forged signature. Everything spread across the wood like a mute confession. She ran a hand through her hair and for the first time looked defeated. "You don't understand, Mom," she said softly. "I only wanted what was fair. Dad promised me this house would be mine. You showed up and took everything from me." "I didn't take anything from you," I answered with a calm that surprised me. "Your father loved me. That's what you couldn't stand. You took advantage of him," she shouted. "No, I took care of him. And that's what you'll never forgive me." The silence that followed was long, dragging years of resentment. Daniel lowered his head, and Lucy, from the hallway, stayed still, as if she knew that conversation shouldn't be interrupted. Veronica was breathing hard, eyes glistening with rage or tears. I couldn't tell. "Mom," she said at last, voice breaking, "you can't do this to me. They're going to destroy me." "I'm not destroying you, Veronica. You've been destroying yourself since you started confusing love with possession." She tried to answer, but no sound came. She turned to Daniel, searching for a crack of compassion. "Say something, please. You're my brother." "I can't," he said. "Not after hearing what you said, not after seeing what you did. Everything I did for you." "No, Veronica," I cut in. "You did it for you. Always for you." She stepped back, wavering. For a second I thought she would collapse. She looked at me as if trying to find in me the mother she never had, that figure neither her father nor I managed to be for her. And suddenly I understood that behind all her cruelty there was a wound, an emptiness no inheritance would ever fill. But compassion came too late. Lara appeared then at the threshold, discreet, notebook in hand. "Miss Montiel," he said firmly, "an order just came in for you. You need to come with us to give a statement." Veronica turned to him, pale, speechless. Daniel stepped aside, giving her way. She walked slowly to the door and, before leaving, turned to me. "You don't get it, Mom," she whispered. "You'll end up alone." "No, dear," I replied. "I was already alone since you started hating me." When the door closed, the silence was so great that the clock's tick sounded like a hammer. Daniel collapsed into a chair, Lucy exhaled, and I stared at the empty space where Veronica had been, wondering at what exact moment family love turns into war. Outside, the wind picked up and the sun hid behind a thick cloud. Daniel came over and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. Don't apologize, son. You weren't the one who raised her on resentment. We could have helped her." "Maybe. But there are people for whom love isn't enough. They need to have it all to feel safe, and when they can't, they destroy." Lucy stood, packed the folders, and said she'd be back later with copies of the complaint. When she left, the house fell silent again, but it was a different silence, a clean silence, with air. I looked at Daniel, exhausted, and thought maybe there was still something to mend between us. I stroked his face and asked him to rest. That night, when I was finally alone, I opened the window and let the cold air in. The smell of jasmine hit me full on, bringing me back to the summers of my youth, when everything was simpler and the future still shapeless. I thought of my husband, his deep laugh, how he would have hated to see his daughter become his enemy, and I felt a pang of sadness, but also a deep calm. I closed my eyes and promised myself that, whatever happens, I would never again let anyone decide for me. At dawn, the first rays of light entered the room, and I knew the end was near, not like a tragedy, but like a well-earned rest. Because when truth settles in, it makes no noise. It simply breathes with you. Several weeks passed since that morning when Veronica crossed my door for the last time, and I still sometimes woke with the sensation that her perfume hung in the air, that dense, sweet aroma that always felt more disguise than fragrance. Routine settled back little by little, like a cat returning to sleep in the same corner. Daniel stayed with me longer than he'd planned, perhaps because he felt he had to, or because deep down he needed a place to hide his own guilt. At first we spoke little, but each day we understood each other a bit more. We shared long silences, coffees on the terrace, and that kind of tired tenderness that remains after a war. Lucy came often now, without her uniform, in simple clothes and a smile that had replaced the tension she wore when I met her. Sometimes she stayed for lunch, other times she just walked with me in the garden. On one of those walks she told me Veronica and Gavin were facing a long judicial process, and that the notary, after questioning, had decided to cooperate. I didn't feel joy. What I felt was closer to relief, a kind of peace stripped of excitement. There was no pleasure in seeing them fall, just the confirmation that, for once, the scale wasn't tipping toward the powerful. Dr. Rivers called as well. His voice sounded different, more human. He thanked me for uncovering the fraudulent use of his seal and promised to help in any way possible. "It's not every day a patient saves her doctor's reputation," he said with a laugh. I replied that life has a sense of humor, and that sometimes the sick end up curing the system. We hung up laughing, though inside I felt a strange nostalgia, because when everything gets fixed too late, justice feels a bit like silence. One morning I woke and noticed something I couldn't name at first. The house smelled like me again. Like my coffee, my books, my plants, my mess. It didn't smell like fear, or someone else's perfume, or fake papers. I stood in the middle of the living room, hands in the robe pockets, watching the light come through the window and rest on the old portrait of my husband. I greeted him softly, as always, and told him everything was over, or almost. Sometimes I still dreamed of Veronica, not as an enemy, but as the lost woman who could have been different if life or we had wanted otherwise. I suppose resentment also gets tired when you feed it too much. That afternoon, Daniel came with a surprise. He had decided to stay in the country. He said time with his mother had taught him that affection isn't measured in calls or plane tickets, but in everyday presence. "I realized I lost years thinking you were fine on your own," he told me. I didn't know what to say. I hugged him, and in that embrace, I understood that sometimes life insists on breaking you just to force you to mend what truly matters. The following months were strange. The local press ran a small note about the case. Elderly woman uncovers ring of forgeries and attempted familial homicide. They didn't mention names, and that was enough for me. I didn't want fame or pity, just to sleep without a clenched fist. Lucy visited now and then, without medical reasons, and one day, without warning, she left an envelope on the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Your last medical report. No more follow-up needed." "And what am I going to do without you now?" "Live, Mary. That's something you learn too." That night I poured myself a glass of wine, the same bottle Veronica brought that afternoon pretending affection. I uncorked it, smelled the cork, and laughed alone. I toasted without a word and drank slowly, letting the bitter and sweet mix in my mouth. Then I opened my nightstand drawer and took out a new white envelope. Inside was my new will. Clean, no tricks, no airs that weighed on me like guilt. I drafted it myself with an honest notary's help, and at the end, under my signature, I'd written a line that came out without thinking. For Lucy, who reminded me it wasn't time yet. I turned off the lights and sat listening to the silence. I thought of everything that had happened, how fragile trust can be, how life teaches you to look at people not by what they say, but by how they look at you when they think you're not watching. I laughed, remembering Veronica's face when she discovered the recorder, and, immediately, felt old for laughing at that. But free, too. That night I slept deeply, dreamless, with the feeling that time had finally made peace with me. When I woke, the sun was coming in warm through the window, and I heard Daniel making coffee in the kitchen. Lucy had left a note on the fridge. "Remember to take life slowly, that one doesn't come in pills." I stared at it for a long while and smiled. Because sometimes, when a story ends, there are no applause or happy endings, just a serene silence that wraps everything. And in that silence, I allowed myself to think out loud, for me and for whoever wanted to listen. At this age, you no longer fear dying. What you truly fear is being taken for a fool. And I had finally proved I could still defend my intelligence, my home, and my name. After all, surviving is also a way to win. And that's where my story ends, at least this part. If you made it this far, thank you for joining me on this journey of silences, suspicions, and small victories. I like to think that every story we tell saves us a little, and that someone, somewhere, sees themselves reflected in a piece of what we were. Before I go, I'd love to know what you thought, where you're listening from, and if you've ever felt something similar. Tell me in the comments. I always read every word. And if you want to keep hearing stories like this, real, raw, but full of life, don't forget to subscribe. I promise the next one will also leave your heart beating a little faster.